Okay. Folks can turn their cameras on. I think we'll be fine. We are live streaming now. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Old Colony Charter Review Subcommittee meeting this evening. The topic of tonight's meeting will be a Freetown request to join the Old Colony School District. In attendance this evening, we have from Acushnet, Ron Melbourne, and John Howcroft. Thank you, John. From Rochester, Chris Stoltenberg, Greenwood Hartley, Brad Morse, Suzanne Sindler, and Paul. How do I pronounce your name? Chiaburri, Paul? Did I get that right? Thank you. From Mattapoisett, Mike Lorenko and John DaCosta. From Carver, Sarah Hewins and Mark Townsend, Alan Germain. And am I missing anyone in the crowd here before we continue with some other names? We also have Shirley Burke, chair of our school committee from Rochester, Steve Cassidy, chair of the Charter Review Subcommittee from Mattapoisett, Don Foster, school committee, town of Lakeville. Remotely, we have Joanne Pushkar from Carver School Committee and Maurice Saint Amand from Acushnet School Committee. Also joining us remotely, Sarah Griffith, our business manager, Maureen Candido from Lakeville, Richard LaCamera from the town of Lakeville, Leah Fabian from the town of Lakeville, Brian Day from Lakeville, Todd Hassett from Lakeville, and Bob Marshall from the town of Lakeville. Welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. I'm Aaron Polanski, I'm the Superintendent Director. We have Jolene Costa, Secretary to the School Committee, and Kyle O'Neill, our Technology Director. At this point in time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Steve Cassidy to offer additional words.
Good, just stand for the pledge. Very much like that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A moment of silence, please. All right, thank you. As Mr. Polanski mentioned, Freetown had contacted us, interested in joining the district. And since then, we've had many subcommittee meetings about this, and we've got Mr. Polanski's got a PowerPoint presentation for you tonight, and everybody has the pages that were by the computers. Everybody got one? Okay, at this time, I'll turn the meeting back over to Mr. Polanski.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. So what I'm going to do is in our chat for everybody, we'll share our PowerPoint. It will also be projected on the screen behind me. And tonight's discussion is about the consideration of expansion, a Freetown request to join Old Colony. Just a little history. If folks can turn their sound off so that we don't have reverb, that would be wonderful. Just a little history about the Freetown relationship. Freetown students have been attending Old Colony as non-resident tuition-paying students since 1986. In 1999, Freetown had a high of 102 students who attended Old Colony, and since that date, the average number of Freetown students attending Old Colony on an annual basis has been approximately 92 students in grades 9 through 12. In 2017, we had 188 applications for 150 slots in our freshman class. In 2020, Old Colony had 330 applications for 150 slots in our freshman class. 53 of the 330 applications were from Freetown. As a result of the increased interest in Old Colony, all students accepted to the class of 2024 were students from member towns. This left the incoming freshman class of Freetown students without a home for vocational education for the first time since 1986. The process for acceptance was in compliance with the Old Colony admissions policy that is available on our website that requires acceptance of qualifying member students prior to the acceptance of non-resident students. On May 11th, 2020, Old Colony received a formal request from the Freetown Board of Selectmen expressing interest in exploring membership in the Old Colony District. Member towns are being asked to consider this request, and that is why we are here tonight.
Excuse me, Aaron, are we supposed to see a PowerPoint presentation? Are we supposed to see a PowerPoint presentation?
Are you not seeing one?
I'm not, no.
Yes. Are you? Let me see if for some reason,
Yeah,
are you seeing it now?
No.
No, you have to share it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Not at all. I appreciate that. For some reason, I thought it was up. We're sharing the screen. Here we go. Can you see it now, Rich?
Looks like it's coming up, yeah, wait a minute.
Where?
It's a PowerPoint presentation, it's probably gonna take a minute.
Okay, thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
Says you can pause it. There we go.
My apologies. I can start from the beginning if you'd like. Okay. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Murphy's Law, right? On May 11th, 2020, Old Colony received a formal request from the Freetown Board of Selectmen expressing interest in exploring membership in the Old Colony District. Member towns are being asked to consider this request. That's why we're here tonight. Old Colony receives non-resident tuition as set by the state from Freetown for each Freetown student who attends Old Colony. We also receive an additional amount for special education students from Freetown. Freetown receives Chapter 70 reimbursement from the state for students who attend Old Colony. Chapter 70 reimbursement from the state serves as an offset for the costs to Freetown. Freetown is responsible for paying their own transportation costs in our current model. Old Colony receives Chapter 70 and 71 transportation directly from the state on a per pupil basis for all member towns. The remaining funding comes from member town assessments. Old Colony's member towns share costs for transportation, capital project debt service, other capital costs, and all other expenditures not included in the regional school district's net school spending. Historically, Old Colony's budget has exceeded net school spending. The cost to buy in. The school committee proposes that a buy-in cost be established and assessed as a requirement for Freetown's admission to the district. The buy-in cost has been estimated as a factor of debt. In order to calculate a buy-in cost, Old Colony used our current outstanding debt consisting of a capital lease from FY11 and a bond payable FY16 and determined what Freetown's per pupil assessment would have been. That amount is $601,809,000. This cost would be paid over 10 years for an annual fee of $60,181. In comparison, Lakeville joined the district in 1992 for $319,000. In 2020, that amount would have a value of $598,821. That was figured using an inflation calculator to determine current day value. At the time Lakeville bought in, the Commonwealth offered a program that reimbursed Lakeville for a majority of their buy-in costs. This program no longer exists. We have our business manager, Sarah Griffith, with us, and Sarah can speak a little bit about the buy-in cost at a later time when we are going to be fielding questions and providing some answers. The pros and cons of the Freetown, the potential for Freetown membership are as follows. If Freetown joins the district, assessments will be divided amongst 6 towns instead of 5. Chapter 70 and Chapter 71 transportation money associated with Freetown enrollment will come directly to the Old Colony School District. Freetown will secure representation through seats on the Old Colony District School Committee. The benefit of collaboration and communication at the town level has always been an asset for our Old Colony community. If Freetown does not join, no guarantee can be provided to Freetown for the admission of its students. As we saw this past year, no Freetown students were accepted to the freshman class. We did see an increase for a number of our member towns, some more so than others. And by example, we saw an increase, if I may, of 15 additional students in Acushnet, 3 additional students in Carver, 11 additional students in Lakeville, 6 additional students in Mattapoisett, a decrease of 5 students in Rochester, and a decrease of 23 students in Freetown. The overall growth for the district was an increase of 7 students. At our December 5th meeting, we discussed the potential implications of the increased interest in Old Colony, and if member students were to qualify, what that might mean in terms of enrollment per town. And so that has come to fruition, and we have seen significant increases in a number of our towns. Expansion of the physical plant will allow us to accommodate increased interest regardless of Freetown status. For folks who are in attendance, you may remember we talked about submitting a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. That statement of interest was submitted last year. We should find out in December about where we are in terms of the pipeline. Expansion of Old Colony will result in an improvement of facilities and the potential expansion of vocational programs. In the event Freetown is a part of the district, costs will be shared among 6 towns instead of 5. Our recommendation comes as follows. For over 3 decades, Freetown students have attended Old Colony. The addition of Freetown to the Old Colony district could build upon what has always been a productive relationship as we consider the future of Old Colony moving forward. That's our brief presentation this evening. We wanted to share that with folks so that they had an idea of the discussion and ideas moving forward relative to the Freetown request. And at this point in time, we wanted to take the opportunity to field some questions and answers for the group. Yes, why don't I start with Woody, if I could.
Yeah, the recommendation doesn't, it says it's a recommendation, but it doesn't really say we recommend that Freetown join. I guess that's what you're saying, we recommend.
Yeah.
When you say we recommend, is that by a vote of the school committee?
That was a charter review meeting initially, and then this was sent as a draft to the school committee, but not for a school committee vote. That actually is coming as a recommendation first to this group. We'd like to receive feedback from this group, if I'm correct in identifying that, before we move to the full school committee. We'd like to hear from this group about their thoughts. Mark.
If Freetown was admitted, what would that mean to available slots for the current member towns, specifically Carver, but all the member towns?
I think we would see, in the early stage, we would probably see a redistribution, much like what we've seen in past years, similar to that. This year, we saw 23 less Freetown students, if that gives you an idea of what the impacts were. I think that when we looked at the 53 students who applied from Freetown, there may have been as many as 30 who would have qualified for acceptance. So you're talking about a differential spread amongst 5 different member towns that could be up to 30 students. In the long run, if we're visionaries and we're looking to expand, there are benefits that come with this possibility as well, which is shared costs between 6 towns instead of 5. As we talked about in December, we expect that with the reduction of Freetown students, assessments will go up in our member town, in the districts where our member towns see the increase in students, because money follows students. So there's pros and cons to each side of it, right? There's a financial weight that we carry with every student who attends Old Colony that I think towns have been more than willing to support, because I truly believe, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe the Old Colony education is a phenomenal education. That being said, I think that the history of the Freetown relationship is one that I feel strongly about supporting, with a vision of expansion in the future. We'd like to be adding things like plumbing, HVAC, biotech to our programming, which is why we submitted the statement of interest.
If I could, as a follow-up, is there any additional state aid that would be available to Old Colony if we were to expand from 5 to 6 towns? Does that change any of the formulas that
What we've heard is, Sarah, are you with us right now?
Yes, I'm here.
Why don't I turn the financial question over to you? The question from Mark Townsend from Carver is, would there be additional state aid that follows the students from Freetown if they were to come to Old Colony? Is that correct, Mark?
Yes, if Freetown chooses to join Old Colony, that would increase the district's foundation enrollment. Therefore, we would receive additional state aid for those students.
Aaron, I've lost my audio.
Can everyone else hear me?
Can you hear us now, Bob?
Yes, thank you.
I apologize.
So I don't know whether to ask for a raw number. I guess percentage is a better way to tell us what our percent that we're contributing go down a little tiny bit or down a whole lot, or what would be exactly?
Sarah, the question is there a way of forecasting, and correct me if I misstate this, is there a way of forecasting what the contribution or offset might be from Freetown students? My understanding when we met with the state was that it would be very similar to what the non-resident tuition is, that there wouldn't be a big fluctuation. Is that accurate, Sarah?
Can you hear me okay?
We can now, yes?
Okay, the connection is not good. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Is there a way to forecast, and again, this question came from Sarah Hewins from Carver. Is there a way to forecast what the offset might be if a 6th town were to be contributing as a member town, what the offset might be for assessments? Is it a significant amount?
Well, we did a little bit of work. The charter review subcommittee did a little bit of work to try to look at, based on trends of enrollment, what the assessment offset might be going forward. But of course, the applications, there's no real way to predict how that will fall. So, Aaron, I don't know if you want to speak to some of the forecasting we did based on enrollment moving forward. Obviously, depending on percentage increase in the budget and depending on the increases in state aid, the trickle down will come to assessment. and then will be split based on enrollment at the school. So the more Freetown students we have, the more that will help the assessment offset moving forward.
And I think to clarify for you, Sarah, I think also, and there's two Sarahs, so I'm talking to Sarah from Carver. If I were to forecast, I'd say we'd see about over 4 years, over a 4-year period of time without growth to the district, right? Because there are a lot of moving parts. Without the district expanding to a larger capacity, if we were to stay as we are, I think we would probably see between 25 and 30 Freetown students added per year. Because historically, what we've seen with what's available, because they don't get first pick of the opportunity, if that makes sense. Historically, they only had what was available. But this year, if we use this year as a model, we saw as many as 30 students who would have been admitted had they been members. So if you extrapolate that over a 4-year period of time, you're now looking at 120 Freetown students. And that's a significant contribution in terms of an assessment. It would mirror something I would think similar to that of Lakeville. Is that a fair overview?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, and forgive me if it sounds uninformed, but what's capping the capacity of the school now? Is it a state cap? Is it the facilities?
Facilities.
And if we were to admit the Freetown students, does that improve the odds of being, or maybe the timeline of being able to expand things through your application to that state?
We did talk about the fact that we have a non-member school when we submitted our application that had potential interest, or that there may be consideration down the road. I don't know that it expedites it, because independent, and I think it's very important that we state this, enrollment numbers right now are very healthy, right? When you look at 330 applications and you subtract the 53 from Freetown, you're still looking at 280 applications. That's healthy. When it comes to expansion of Old Colony, to have that support from a sixth town adds to viability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at.
Right? But the current model as it stands, what's limiting us most is really just facilities. If we wanted to put another Chapter 74 program in, we'd have to be building outbuildings. There's nowhere to do it in the current facility. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Lorenko?
Yeah, just, I guess comments. One, the trend from 17 to 2020 is an increase of 75% in applicants. So that's a massive increase. I guess I kind of would want to know how the process of determining, with adding a sixth town, how you're weeding out kids between everybody in the region would be kind of important for me to understand. I guess the other concern I have, I know we talk about expansion. I also understand the economic environment we're in right now, and the MSBA is likely going to have less funds to operate from now to the foreseeable future, at least for the first few years. So if you're not going to get money from the MSBA, you can't change the facility through that. What is the school looking to do, I guess, in order to take on another town, in order to expand that enrollment?
Sure. So to answer your question, without an MSBA project, some of the things we've considered is even a portable classroom, let's say, for a biotech program. You can run certain programs out of a portable structure, other programs you cannot. You couldn't add plumbing and do that out of a portable classroom, but you could add, let's say, a biotech, or you could add or you could shift so that you might move certain Chapter 74 programs that can be run out of portable classrooms to those locations, and then utilize the in-house location, let's say, for an additional academic classroom. Because we also have to remember that if you add Chapter 74 programs and you increase your population, it also comes with the need to add academic teachers on the flip side of that, because we're a vocational school. So I think your question is a good question, because we should be thinking 3 steps ahead of, what if the MSBA does not have funding available for a new facility? What are the alternatives that we're thinking of? Those are some of the alternatives. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that is.
Okay. Alan?
think everybody is on the same page. I think that the bottom line here is that we don't know what we don't know. Leaving situation as it is right this minute obviously hurts Freetown. Letting Freetown come in as a member is obviously for the immediate future. In this year, for instance, would obviously hurt the member towns as far as the participation from within the towns. So naturally, less kids go, so our assessments would be less because we have another community involved. On the plus side of that picture is the ability to expand and get to a place where you can half again your enrollment. So instead of having, 125 slots open, you could have 275 slots open.
Right.
So it's like everything else you do, it requires, there's the initial spend, then there's the slump, then there's the takeoff. So I don't really know that I don't think there is any perfect answer as to which way to go here. I think that it's pros and cons on both sides, but I think for the long-term investment, and I've said this at a couple of finance committee meetings that we've had here when you guys do your budget, I think this school has to expand. And I think that that's a great thing to have it happen, and I think the vocational education is the way to go. And if Freetown wants to pony up, I'm not particularly crazy about the 10-year payment plan, but if they want to pony up, and it gives the school the ability to expand its curriculum and expand its facility to allow more kids into it, then I think that's a fabulous idea. I think it'll hurt initially. I think it'll pay off in the long.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
said you're gonna know where we stand with the pipeline of the SBA. What in your mind is number 20 a good number, or obviously number 1 is a great number? But what do you factor in when they give you the results? You stand in the pipeline to get SBA funding.
So what they've told us is that they'll notify us by December about whether or not we'll be invited into a feasibility study. And then you go through a feasibility phase, which would eventually lead to a next phase of the possibility of.
Okay, so that won't be a great road marker. That just says you'll be considered.
Exactly, yeah. Are there any other questions that we can entertain? Rich LaCamera is with us from Lakeville. Can you see Rich?
Yeah. A question. The project that's been submitted to the proposed project that's been submitted to the state, how many students is that project going to accommodate?
So basically, that's determined during a feasibility study, Rich. It wouldn't be determined as part of the project.
I lost you.
We give them all of the information and they come back and they work with us through a feasibility study to identify what the project might look like. Now, here's the reality. If Freetown is a member, they only build for your member population. The MSBA project is not for non-member population. They will not consider your non-member population as part of an MSBA project. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's helpful. The question, is that I'm glad there's so much interest, with students interested in the school. That's fantastic. But what I get concerned about is that, first of all, this project, if this project happens, is probably at least 5-6 years out at the earliest, by the time you get it approved and the whole thing. So, during that time frame, if we have, just from our communities, 300 kids applying, for a freshman class of 150, right, thereabouts, that's 2 to 1. And so I know that it should have been done in the past, but it wasn't. But if you look at it, at least I look at it, is that, I know you said, I think we had 10 or 11 students or whatever, that if you look at the cost per pupil for each town, it's an average of about $15,000, per student. So that means that if the 5 towns had, 25 more students or whatever, be 15,000 times 25. So if we had 5 students, it'd be $75,000, just as an example. So I'm concerned about that because I think that, these member towns have invested a lot of money for a lot of years, you know, having to do with not only building, Lakeville wasn't part of the original first part, but got involved right up very early. That all the principal and interest, all the operating expenses and the improvements to the facilities that the 5 towns have invested, you know, over the years, I personally think a $600,000 buy-in cost, $60,000 a year over 10 years is pretty cheap. And that's just my opinion.
When you look at the calculator and you look at the rate of inflation, it's actually almost shockingly identical to what Lakeville paid. And Lakeville received a huge reimbursement from the state at the time because there was programming that allowed for that. But that no longer exists, unfortunately, for Freetown. They're not in a position to be reimbursed for a buy-in. But I hear what you're saying. I just think we were very surprised when we saw that the amount that Lakeville had paid was very similar to the debt that Sarah figured when you look at inflation rates.
But I'm not just talking about the debt, the existing debt, you know, I'm talking about, you know, the value and of the building itself is, I'm going to guess, is probably $30 million or more in today's dollar amount, I would think. So, I mean, that's a pretty big number. The other thing that concerns me is that, and I don't trust the state. So if we're going to do this, and I know Sarah and I had this conversation, I'd like to see it in writing because Lakeville regionalized K through 12 with Freetown. There's nothing to do with Freetown, by the way. And we said, well, we're going to get all this money. And the first year we had to come up with another $600,000. Freetown come up, got $6,000 credit. So I'm concerned about that. Okay. And I want to make sure that it's easy for them to say, I've been there, we've done that. And it's easy for them to say that, oh yeah, we'll do that. And then they turn around and say, oh no, we're not going to do that. So that would be a concern of mine as well. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Rich. Woody?
Aaron, this
yeah.
is Leah Fabian, Lakeville Selectman. So my kids are a few years graduated from high school, but both of them participated in the, the field trip that used to take place to Old Colony during your 8th grade year, the beginning of your 8th grade year, before kids had to do applications, whatever. So I always thought, until I became a selectman, that Freetown was a member. So then when I became a selectman and I started doing all kinds of homework, I realized, that they weren't. But I guess I do believe in the past they've applied to be a member, but that never took place. Is there something else that's changed for Freetown now, other than the number of students is not allowing their students to get in, the number of applicants? Or is it just strictly, is it a financial thing that's changed for them? I'm not even sure. If you can just give us a little bit of the history on, other times time that Freetown may have applied to be a member.
Sure. I think what's very different, Leah, when I looked at the enrollment trends, and I don't know the intricacies because I've only been here for a limited period. I arrived in 2016. But what I can speak to is the fact that our current enrollment and the application process resulted in so many qualified applicants this past year that we were in a position where we had to draw from our member towns first, with no option, unfortunately, for the Freetown students. And I think that when they realized that really this trend has been somewhat consistent over the last couple of years, they're recognizing that there's a need for them to find a home for their vocational students, just to put it very openly. And without a home, those students really don't have an option. So the fact that we were unable to accommodate any Freetown students was probably an impetus for the discussions to take place, if that's a fair statement. I have our subcommittee to my right and left, and I would guess that they would articulate the same notion.
Okay, I mean, that's a good enough answer for me.
Aaron, just to follow up, please, watch the camera.
Of course.
To me, it doesn't make any difference whether Freetown joins or not. We need a building project. We need to expand the building. We need to renovate the building. So I'm in support of doing that one way or the other.
Thank you so much, Rich. I know I can tell you, for everybody who's in this room, that means a great deal to us. And I can't thank you enough for stating that publicly. Thank you. Woody, did you have questions?
Yeah. Two questions, I guess. I agree with the gentleman in front of me. I think $600,000 is a good deal. I don't know why we wouldn't want them to come up with that money and pay it.
Sure.
How they finance that is up to them. But why should we have that money in our coffers in this school, just like if they were buying these buildings, thinking they built them?
Sure.
We wouldn't spread that out. So I would really rather see you get that money, have them in solid with that money like that. Secondly, I agree with what Rich said too. I mean, I'd like to see this school expand what it can offer. Vocational education is different than it used to be. It's much broader, much better, much more in tune with the world as we see it now. But remind me of the process when we are talking about a multi-million-dollar project with 4 members or 5 members. All 5 members have to go along with it.
Correct. Yeah, it would have to be approved by each of our member towns.
So 3 members voting, all 5, all 4 or 5 members have to go along with it.
Correct. Yeah. So we would need to have support from each of our member towns, not only for a building project, but also for the addition of Freetown to the district. That requires 100% agreement by all member towns. And so if for some reason any town here would like us to present at their town meeting the same presentation that we did this evening, I want you to know we're more than happy to take this on the road and come to you so that you can have this presentation made in your own setting as well. Our interactions with each of our member towns, as long as I've been here, we've had nothing but incredible support, and we like to reciprocate and make sure that we're available to share commentary, not just at Old Colony via a Zoom meeting, but also in your respective venues, should you need us to do that, so that if there are questions, we can address them. So,
Brief follow-up, if I could.
Absolutely, yeah.
What I said when you said, process-wise,
yeah,
I would much rather see the school committee vote to support this as a group way prior to the towns. I mean, we've got
Sure.
5 people from Rochester here, we've got 4 from Carver, this is no place to be voting or making any decisions. All 3 of our members here, we're going to want to talk about this.
Right.
I'd like to see a unanimous vote from the school committee. That's what they want to do first before I take action.
that's great.
I'd like to see you before. I'd like to see you behind this first.
Yeah,
I think the thought of the school committee at this moment is that we can't go forward and talk to the town of Freetown without the blessing of the town officials. Because that's an important step. We don't do anything in a vacuum, Woody. So we're asking you to tell us, are you agreeable? And then if you're agreeable, we will take this to a vote to go to Freetown and talk to them. Everything is very preliminary because we also want to know that Freetown is still on board as well for coming in before we start the process, because it will be a long process. This process will not be achieved this year because the votes of the school committee, the votes of town meeting have to be done before December so that it can be approved by the Commissioner of Education. So we're at least a year out.
and I think also to build,
So if this school committee votes in favor of it, then our representatives on this school committee would come to our meeting and ask us for our support.
But what
We have a process that makes
What
sense.
we're looking for is almost putting that cart before the horse. What we would like, because imagine if we didn't hold this tonight and we did that, and then we came to the towns and the towns were vehemently opposed to it.
But you are doing this. I mean, this.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So I think it's more of like a vetting process, Woody, if that makes sense, just to run this by folks, if they have insights around feedback that they want us to consider. For instance, you and Alan identified the idea of maybe a full payment and not a payment plan, so to speak, if I may say it that way, right? Instead of 10 installments over 10 years, the idea of a full payment. That could become a discussion at a school committee level where we might say, you know what, when we ran this by the member towns, this was brought up. What is the feeling of the school committee? But I think it's a partnership where there's a collaboration. And then what we'll do is we'll take the insights of this group and all the Q&A that came about, bring that to a full committee at the October meeting and say, here's the feedback we received. We'd like to take a vote, then reach back out to the towns and say, this was the vote. So I think we're on the same page. It's just a matter of, yeah, we just want to include everybody in the process, because to do it blindly and just take a vote without hearing from you first, we think is irresponsible, because we want to be as transparent as possible with the process and say to people, what are your thoughts? What do you think? Give us some feedback, give us some insights. We'll run those ideas by the school committee. We'll take a vote in October. We'll get back to people. If the school committee votes unanimously, the next step would be to invite Freetown in for a conversation and say to them, here's what we're thinking in terms of our presentation. This is not a negotiation. It's just simply an offer where we say, this is what we'd like to offer. And Freetown can say we're interested or we're not interested. If they're interested at that point in time, we have to figure out what the next step will be. But I think that your point is well made, and we're ready to do that. But we didn't want to do that without first hearing from folks about if there were any concerns. We want to make sure we ask questions. We want to make sure that we leave really no stone unturned and that we move forward in a very collaborative manner.
Thanks, Aaron, for that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the feedback. I agree that the school committee should, be voting before the towns. I do also agree with the financing of that 600,000, if you will, that if we were to finance it, it should be more than just 0% over 10 years is kind of proposed. So if Freetown were, not resistant to just handing up 600,000, but maybe the 600,000 needs to be a little bit more if we're going to amortize it over 10 years. So I think some discussion might need to take place there. But overall, I mean, I have a vote, but I'm certainly supportive of it.
Thank you. Sarah?
You mentioned coming to our town meetings to do a presentation.
Sure.
Were you speaking specifically of an annual town meeting, spring town meeting?
No, we could do a selectmen's meeting. It could be a monthly meeting. Anytime we've received a call from any of our towns about an issue, we're happy to get on the road and become more familiar with folks. We enjoy the opportunity. I think the more Old Colony can be out there, the more people can see who we are, because we don't want to be a number and we don't want to be the name of a school. We want to be people. Just like we want our kids to walk through the hallway and know they're loved. I started meeting with every freshman today. I met with 16 kids today. I'll meet with 16 kids tomorrow. It's hard to get to know them behind a mask. So I sat with each one individually. They take a survey about how we connect to them within the school. And we think that personal touch is really important. So the same holds true with our communities. It's nice to see familiar faces, and then it's nice to meet new people. Sometimes you talk on the phone and it's not until you stand across from one another and you get to see one another. But I think we get into education and public service because we care about people. And if we can't enjoy the journey, we probably shouldn't be doing the job. So hopefully we can find ways to help one another and be collaborative and build something special here. And I think, like Shirley said, to do that without the input from the people whom we serve would be remiss on our part.
I appreciate that. We'll have you at one of our select
We would love to. So just please call anytime. Mike?
I agree with you financially, and I also think vocational school, the interest is going to increase. It just is. As college increases, cost increases. I guess my only fear is going to have to communicate to the public, 5 towns are currently part of it, that their kids aren't going to lose out by adding a number from another member town. And that MSBA will be informed, but also whatever alternatives you have in order to increase that enrollment number is going to be huge, because I can tell you, parents in that point will be upset if their kid's going to lose out because we're adding a number of member towns. So that's my only challenge. I agree. Financially, it all makes sense. All of this makes sense. It's just you only have so many slots, and there's only so many people. And right now, you don't have enough slots for the current 5 towns. So you're talking about adding another one. It just seems like a challenge for those 5 member towns.
Right.
I mean, the only benefit I could see is Freetown's been involved with Old Colony for quite some time. So they've been paying the share of this for quite some time. So it's not like they're a new town coming in, but that's going to be a challenge for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the biggest challenge, Mike. I really think you're right. I think the biggest challenge is that it's become such a sacred place. And I think people really do value the education. And in my heart of hearts, I believe that our job is to be visionaries and look at the short-term cost for the long-term payoff. And if we want to expand and we want to really become something greater than what we are, if you ever tour the Minuteman High School in Lexington and see what they've done there, it's awe-inspiring. Cape Cod Tech is building a new building. Bristol Aggie just put an addition on. So all of these vocational schools are expanding, and we're not in a position to do that right now. And if we were to ask 5 towns to take that on instead of 6, that's a tall order, because we're going to ask Lakeville and Acushnet to take a huge increase this year when we look at assessments. And I know we talked about it in December, but I can remember when Alan said, everybody in this room wants the students to have access to an Old Colony education. And we all nodded and said, gosh, of course we do. But when we looked at the numbers, we thought to ourselves, gosh, this is real. It's very real. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's a real conundrum. There's pros and cons. But I think from the standpoint of the direction we want to head, we want to be visionaries and we want to be able to offer as much as we can. And there are gaps in plumbing. There are gaps in HVAC. There are gaps in biotech. And there are jobs in all 3 of those vocations right now. And we want to be able to offer those opportunities to students who could come in and help us grow as a school and help us build our legacy, which is something we're incredibly proud of.
Mr. Belansky?
Yes.
Hi, Brian Day from Lakeville. Kind of following on with the gentleman from Mattapoisett, I believe, was just talking about if we were to, short of expansion, adopt another member community, we're obviously admitting slots to our own students may be lost. This might not exist because I'm not familiar enough with the process, but does the concept of a phased, adoption exist? Is it strictly binary, member, not member, or over a period of years as they pay, can they be a quarter member, a half member, and kind of phase their slots in? Because I'm sure, not just the kids that are finding out they got to come in this year, there's bound to be a number of students in that next class coming that their plan is to come to Old Colony and they're doing everything they can to get in. And by, flipping the switch to yes, you're now a member, well, we've immediately kind of rearranged the deck chairs.
Yeah, I think, Brian, to answer your question, by nature of statute, if you're a member, you would have to follow the admissions policy. And the admissions policy is a qualifying criteria. So folks qualify, they're scored based on a 100-point scale, and then that scale is rank ordered. And that's the selection process used for admission. It's available on our website. I think the struggle, to your point, is members are provided access before the non-members so long as they're qualifying members. And that's where this inundation, because of the number of 330 applicants, came into play this year. We've never seen so many. But to your point, the phase in is something that would be, I think, challenging, to be quite honest, but has been talked about, and I understand where you're coming from. Historically, what we ran into, and we just updated our district agreement because it used to have quotas in it. And what we were hearing was, if you have a town, let's say, and I'll just use a hypothetical because this became a real case at another vocational school, where there's one affluent community and one community that's not as affluent. And the affluent community is not filling their slots. We'll call those quotas, right? And the community that's less affluent is inundated and has more students than they do have slots. What we were hearing is it's almost discriminatory, because if you said to those students, well, if you just moved to the affluent community, you'd get in, right? And they would reply and say, well, we can't afford to buy real estate in that affluent community. You follow what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the rationale for eliminating quotas when we spoke to the Department of Ed was we want to stay away from anything that muddies the application process and be very clean with the process. That being said, we have to be careful with a phase-in, because a phase-in would probably involve quotas. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but to use your word, to be a visionary, I'm trying to figure out a way that makes it fairer to the existing children.
I think you're spot on thinking that way. I think a lot of people have even brought up, how do you approach that conundrum? Because we're talking about displacement. It's exactly what Freetown students felt this year, right? Basically, we thought it might be an issue, and I have to say, despite preliminary conversations, I could have done better in communicating. You can always do better. but maybe I should have really hung a bigger sign on it. And I always say when things go right, I like to tell our team how wonderful they are. But when when people are disappointed, I like to own it. And so maybe I should have hung a bigger sign on it for the Freetown kids who were waiting their whole life to get in, and then all of a sudden they didn't, and they're without a home. So I think it's just the reverse. And I think your thought process is exactly where a lot of people come from, and it's fair and it's reasonable and it makes a whole lot of sense.
I appreciate the complexities.
Aaron, Leah Fabian again from Lakeville. Again, through my own experience, my son had gotten accepted and he decided not to go. And there was a, rush in the guidance department at the middle school here in Lakeville. And they were like, because there's a kid on a waiting list waiting to hear. So I'm assuming that because things are the way they are, Freetown kids can't even be waitlisted. It would have to be the member communities only that could even be waitlisted, let's say, correct?
Yeah, really, Leo, what we do is we never take away hope, because you have to also be a realist and plan for, let's say, worst case scenario. Let's say, hypothetically, 100 kids said, hey, we all just made a pact and we're not going to Old Colony. I know that sounds silly, right?
Yeah. No, but for example's sake, yep.
But just for example's sake, we always want to think ahead to what could, even worst case scenario, happen. So those students, unless there really is zero hope, they still are told that they're waitlisted. However, we did very clearly communicate this year that it would be almost impossible for a Freetown student to be accepted. To your point, you're spot on. So we did very clearly communicate to Freetown that we just didn't feel like we'd be able to accommodate them because the numbers were so deep. So you're very accurate.
Right. And then it becomes you may have a kid attending Old Colony who only mediocre wants to go there just because they're in a member community, whereas you may have really had a kid in Freetown who was avid and really wants to, whatever. And then again, I don't know what happens too, because I do know that kids, will come back to their local school. Some of them leave Old Colony, come back to Apponequet, and I don't know what happens in those cases, how you fill those. I guess you can't really fill when it's a vocational school like your, sophomore, junior, senior year, but I don't know what that does to the freshman class, how many kids, come back. But again, let's say you have 20 kids that start this year and that decide by October that they're going to Apponequet, let's say. Can you now fill, or I guess I just want to know what every opportunity is right now for a Freetown kid to get in.
So this year, the chances, I would say, are less than 1% if we're just going to talk percentages, because the interest is that high. But to your point, you are 100% accurate that a student cannot come to Old Colony beginning in their junior year because there's too much curriculum lost, and they can't learn what they would have needed to be successful in a vocational setting, i.e. safety or whatever else it may be. However,
so go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. However, in their freshman year, what we've seen over the course of the last few years is an incredible retention rate. Our tributaries out are significantly less than what they were a while ago. We're working very diligently to build relationships on an individualized level to make sure students are connected and have an identity here at Old Colony, and that it's not just, again, I always say they're not a number in the hallway. If you read our district improvement plan, it speaks very specifically to individualized relationships. And in your inquiry or in your statement, you are again very accurate, because a student in their sophomore year could be accepted. There's enough time for them to learn what they would have in the tail end of their freshman year when they're assigned to their vocational area, so that we can remediate and catch them up to speed in the beginning of their sophomore year. But after a certain period of time in their sophomore year, they can actually no longer come to Old Colony because they've missed too much material in order to be successful in their respective area. Is that
that absolutely, clears it up for me, because I know that that's definitely, you can have someone in their junior year say, I'm really not feeling this. I'm going to go back to Apponequet. I want to do whatever. at Apponequid instead. And you really can't fill that seat the junior year. It's not like you can just pick from a pool, you know, or it's not an overall number for the school. So in all honesty, I really do feel badly for the kids in Freetown because they didn't have the opportunity. So I would really, I hate for any kid not to be able to do, not to have the opportunity, but
Right.
I do agree with my fellow board member, Rich Camera, that, I would really love to see, some expansion done. I just know that the VOTEC education, and it seems like my kids sort of, hit that. So many of them, even knowing they were college bound, wanted to go to the VOTEC because they feel as though it gives them, for example, one of my sons is an electrical engineer. He had some kids that he knew who had gone to VOTEC, and, they went from college that he knew who had gone to a VOTEC to just try to give them that little bit of edge on their engineering studies. So there really is an attraction for anyone who thinks the attraction isn't there. I mean, 300 applications, 300 plus is, just adding to what I've already known for the last few years that, the VOTEC experience is definitely a very popular thing right now for a lot of reasons for kids. So I just feel really badly that the Freetown kids didn't have the opportunity to go. I really do.
Sure. We appreciate that. And again, that's why we're advocating. Thank you. Mike?
One last thing.
Sure.
Those Freetown kids, do they just go to public school? I guess my only fear is too, is if we wait and not make a decision or decide to put them off, would they negotiate with Old Tech in Bedford or?
So Freetown has reached out to Bristol Plymouth as well, because I think that, as they should, I think everyone's job is to shop, right? And I think that Freetown is doing what they need to do to support their students. So they reached out to Bristol Plymouth, they reached out to us. I believe they may have even reached out to a few other vocational schools. I think Freetown belongs here. I'll say it openly, without hesitation. They've been here for 3 decades. We still have to play by the rules, unfortunately. And this year we had to do what we had to do because that's what the rules tell us we had to do. However, it doesn't mean we don't feel bad, like Leah said. It doesn't take away what it feels like for me, because these kids are important to me. They're important to all of us. I think that there have been a lot of great points that identify the complexities of what we're dealing with tonight. Leah identified the fact that maybe a student can't come in. I'll tell you, we had a student come back September 16th, the first day of school, who went to Fairhaven as a sophomore at the end of their sophomore year and came back as a junior. That's an exception to the rule we just talked about. That student already had the background in their vocational area when they left here at the end of their sophomore year so that they could come back. We leave the door open for those students because we can accommodate them. So if a student started here and happened to go back to their sending district and we haven't filled the slot in their respective shop and they luck out, that student lucked out. But seeing that student come back here, I had a grin from ear to ear because I thought to myself, that student belongs with us. I know we're here to talk about enrollment and I know we're here to talk about Freetown, but it's deeper than that for us. These kids are so important. Their success is so important to us. The relationships are important to us. Freetown is important to us. And the feedback we're getting tonight is very important to us. And I'll just reiterate that continuously because I think it can never be overstated. Yeah.
The bottom line really is that even if Freetown were a member, there would have been 180, I'm sorry, you can't come here letters that would have gone out. So while Freetown would have had some kids come in, there would have been kids from surrounding communities that got in that would have gotten the have a nice day letter. So yeah, you do feel bad because you could never accommodate all 330. Right. Maybe that's what we ought to try to strive for.
And to your point, Alan, that's exactly why we put the SOI in, because there's such demand that we feel like we want to not only accommodate more students, but expand the possibilities for them, because it's not just about 13 programs. It's about plumbing. I mean, journeymen, our plumbers are just waiting for kids to come out of the woodwork so that they can fill these slots and have future plumbers. HVAC, biotech. I mean, BCC called us and said, can we explore the potential of a biotech addition because they're looking at getting into vaccines. There are so many opportunities out there. We're doing early college. Don Foster teaches at UMass Dartmouth, and he constantly says, you know, we have this kiddo in our shop, and they're from Old Colony, and they're doing incredibly well, and I just wanted to let you know. And we see our kids, you know, there's a misperception that our students may not go on and do things at the collegiate level, when in actuality, they're doing some incredible work. You know, WPI, UMass Dartmouth. We have students who work at Google, Spotify, Brown University. So
I think the quality of the student, and I don't mean to say that disparagingly, I think the quality of the student trying to get into vocational education because they had to apply, because they had to get on the list, because they had to really want it. So you get someone a little bit more focused. They tend to know what they want and where they're going and how they're going to get there. It may not be the perfect shop they take, but the overall education is one that I think is good for them, as opposed to putting a child in the town school system where they have no choice, they got to go.
And I'll tell you, we're 24% special education. And our kids thrive. And they're amazing. And they don't get lost in the shuffle. And they make a name for themselves because they're able to learn the way they need to learn. And that's really powerful. So while it's a competitive process, it's also blind academically. Because what people don't realize is an A is an A is an A. An A in an honors class is the same as an A in a remediated class. And some folks think, oh, well, only the kids who do well in the highest level of academia get in. That's not true. An A is an A is an A. The kids who attendance is one of the highest, you know, point totals for our application. When you look at our application and how we score it, we have daily attendance, we have academic performance, we have an interview, a recommendation, and conduct. And when you think about that, 30 points for attendance, because in a vocation, you have to show up to learn.
That's right.
Right? 26 points for conduct, right? So that's 56 points out of the gate. A counselor recommendation is 5 points. Academic record is 24 points. And an A is an A is an A. And then you have an interview, which is worth 15 points. And when you look at that, it's really, people say, well, geez, my student may never get in. Conduct and attendance will hurt the kids the most. And if you think about who you want to hire, I want to hire the person who's going to show up, and I want to hire the person who's going to be able to follow the rules when I'm working in carpentry or when I'm working in a vocational area where there are safety concerns, right?
I'm biased because I got 5 stepchildren that graduated vocational from this school.
Sure.
I'm a Weymouth vocational graduate. My son's a Weymouth vocational graduate. So we're a little bit lenient.
Leaning to the right side.
In the college classroom, and even more importantly, in the college labs, engineering labs, and even the machine shop, almost without exception, it's kids from the voc tech background, whether it's Old Colony or Diamond or New Bedford or wherever it might be, the kids with a voc tech background are more serious, are more focused, tend to be more mature, and often can deal with people better because they've done internships, they've done co-ops. And I don't mean to make light of it, but they know which end of a screwdriver to use or which end of a soldering iron gets hot. And that isn't always true, sometimes even effective.
I think we all recognize the value of an old college education, but I almost think that before we make a decision on Freetown, we need a little more information on the expansion project, because the bottom line is we all have to go back to our member towns if we admit Freetown and tell our students that, I'm sorry, there isn't a spot for you next year. We're going to lose slots. And unless we go forward with the building project, we won't get those slots back.
Right.
We'll permanently lose those slots. So I think.
So I think that's a really good point, Mark. And just to speak to it, and I think you're right. The good news is this won't happen overnight. We're going to know about in December where we stand in terms of whether or not we're invited into the feasibility stages from MSBA. But if we're not, we're still looking to seek alternatives for expansion in other ways without buildings. Like when Mr. Lorenko made mention of, you know, how do we adjust to accommodate these students? And we talked about outbuildings. We'll think about the possibility of, with an increased source of revenue, because you have additional students, you then look to fund something like a classroom trailer, which they have at South Shore of Oak. And this is Pushkar, I believe, attended South Shore of Oak back in the day, right? But they have trailers where they run their math classrooms, or when they run something that might not be a plumbing, right? But we still need to be visionaries and innovative, to your point, to accommodate that and let people know, yes, there may be a sting in the early stages, but I don't think it will be exacerbated to the point it would be if we were just to sit idle and do nothing. Our plan is not to sit idle and do nothing, regardless of what the outcome may be.
I think we need a total plan, because it would really be very hard for me to go back to Carver and tell students who have been planning for years to go to Old Colony, well, I'm sorry, we've been in another town, so your spot's gone.
Right.
And I think
Sure.
we need to.
And I think it's one of the, when you say what comes first, the chicken or the egg, this is one of those chicken egg situations, and it really is, and we have to remember that. Because you can look at it one way and say, gosh, we have to think about what our building is going to look like if we're going to do a new building. But we also have to think about the offset when you bring in a sixth town to move forward with a building project. Right?
I agree, but I just think if we're going to try to go back to our towns and tell our residents that we're going to lose these spots, we have to go back with a plan and how to come back and bring back the spots. And
yeah,
you could be in a situation where we admit Freetown, they have to appropriate some money to join, but then they vote against the expansion project. And now, you know, our 5 towns have lost students, but we can't get them back. So it's
right. Nope, that's a very valid point. Yep.
I think this is an unusual year, though, for this number of applicants, given the entire circumstances. What was the number that was Freetown got in last year, right?
Yeah, there were Freetown students admitted last year. We were at 306. When we got to 330, it was nearly impossible. I mean, it was just impossible. There was no way.
No Carver kids were told they couldn't come here last year. No Rochester kids. You didn't.
There were kids who didn't qualify because of
Qualifications are different. Story.
right. Correct. Yep. So there were
You
kids who
get in
didn't.
because of your background and your record. That's fine. If you
Yep.
didn't get in because you just didn't get in.
Right.
Because we didn't have room for you. That's another story. I think
Correct.
that's to Mark's point. I think that
No, it's valid. It's a very valid point.
makes it tough for all of us to go back and sell it.
Yep.
Needs to be a package deal.
Sure.
I think there really are 3 legs to this stool. One is an expansion of the curriculum. The second is an expansion of the facilities and the teaching capability. And the third is the expansion in the number of towns and the students. When we think about expansion of the facilities, we're thinking of, I don't want to put a fixed number on it, but it was an addition of over 100 extra students, 100 extra seats. I think that was a guess we had. The number has to come from the state. But it's not as if we're fixed, we would be fixed with just the seats we have now. It'd be quite an increase in the number.
Well, it'd have to be a big expansion, sure.
And the big piece is the state builds to your in-district membership. So if they're going to build to your in-district membership, it's advantageous to consider Freetown as part of a building project, because now you're building to 600 plus instead of 500 something. Does that make sense? So when we talk about which comes first, really, when you want to build to a certain number, I think Mark makes a valid point. We better know they're on board for a building project, because if they're not, they really shouldn't be. And that needs to be a part of the Freetown.
A stipulation.
Right. That might need, like Steve said, that might need to be a stipulation as part of the agreement is, yes, we'd love to have you come in, but we also need to know that you're going to be in support of a building project so that we can have you come in and accommodate
Next
that.
year. So that's a big deal for them just coming in.
I would hate to see us go to them, ask for that 600,000, have them appropriated. Maybe through a minor override, who knows? But then we go for the expansion and they come back and say, well, I'm sorry, we just did this, so we can't do that. And
Right. Yeah, it's valid. It's valid.
Whole project.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuts and bolts to this whole thing, and timing, of course, will be everything, and you know, exactly how it's all laid out. Maybe everything's got to be contingent upon the other. to make it work. Which I'm not sure that even that's possible, but I think there's gonna be a lot of the member towns that are gonna say, well, what if, like Mark just said, what if, yes, but no, we can't because we did this last year.
Right.
Or what if, yes, because there was an override, but we're building something, so now we can't afford to. It's a big deal no matter how we cut the cake.
Yeah.
Except Mark can write you a check if you ask him.
Just don't try to cash it.
Are there any other questions or comments that folks would like to offer before we wrap up? Was this helpful for folks at least to kind of get a feel for where our thoughts are?
I think we should ask them to ratify where we're going. What's our next step?
You feel comfortable with us bringing this to the full school committee?
I'd like to see a flow chart. I think to Mark's point, I'd like to see just call it a master plan, if you will. And let the select board, we have 2 members tonight, maybe let our FinCom look at it, same with the member towns. And then you guys should actually bring it before your school committee and see if we get everybody on board with it, like a master flow, call it a perfect scenario, if you will. But laid out to the pros and cons to it. I think that there's going to be so many nuts and bolts into this project that, one drop ball there and the whole thing can go south.
I think it's nice to hear it sounds as though if we take one tier, like Don said, there's 3 tiers. It sounds as though most towns are in support of expansion. Is that fair? If you're in support of expansion, raise your hand, just for a visual. Okay. So it looks like that was unanimous in terms of support for expansion. In terms of the Freetown piece, it's important for Freetown to be part of that opinion. That needs to come as a result of a Freetown meeting where it's very clearly articulated and we say to them, folks, these are the things we're thinking about, right? So as we think about the Freetown flow chart, it really is a school committee vote, a meeting with Freetown, where we deliberate about the direction for a building in conjunction with expansion, and then it's member towns who would have this brought before them to vote on the docket. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then, to my point earlier, and I think to whoever said it also, while I wouldn't like to see a 10-year payment plan, but if this is looking like it's going to happen, like pick a number, 24 months from them coming on board, then maybe that's a lot to ask them. So maybe you make that a 5-year or a 6-year plan so that they have the ability to come up with the assessment for the expansion. So, we're not trying to blow them right out of the water from day one.
And again, I think
We thought the 10 years though would be a little more palatable.
You're right.
right, the 10-year mirrored what Lakeville did, which is where it came from, I think, is we looked at what Lakeville did and they did it over 10 years, which is where we
They have
came.
to completely agree to the full expansion.
Right,
So they got to be on board with this before they become a member town.
sure, Yeah.
Lock, stock, and barrel before we go back and sell
right,
it.
Aaron,
That's me.
sure. Bob,
I wasn't quite listening when you went through that flow chart. Did you say that Freetown would have to accept this first and then it would go to the member towns for a vote?
basically, we would come to the full committee and we'd have the committee vote on the invitation in response to the request from Freetown. Then we'd extend the invitation for a conversation with Freetown and this same audience present, right? So that
Right.
everyone can be a part of that conversation, at which point we would talk about 2 things that Dawn mentioned as part of the tiers involved in that piece. And one is the expansion, the second is membership, right? And the cost of buy-in.
Yep.
If they're in agreement with that, the next phase of that would be to go to member towns, and we'd have to update our district agreement. And we'd go to member towns and they'd be voting on Freetown membership, the updated language in a district agreement. And really, until we go through a feasibility study, that vote doesn't happen right away because that's really at a different time. But at least we know that the players involved in the conversation have all come to an agreement. To Rich LaCamera's point, we want to verify from the state what the financial implications are and that the state is going to be supporting the finances involved in offset, right? Chapter 70 money that now is directed to Old Colony, Chapter 71 money that is now directed to Old Colony as part of the regional transportation reimbursement. So all of those pieces come into play as well. Is that clarity?
Well, a little bit. I'm just curious, and I don't have an answer, but I have the question. Will it present any problem if Freetown votes on the whole thing first or last? That's my question. I don't understand if there would be a problem.
Well, you can't vote to accept Freetown if they don't vote to come into the district. So they have to agree first.
Gotcha.
You understand what I mean?
I do. Thank you. That's it.
Which is why, like Shirley said, there's a lot of chicken and egg. You know, we want to, there's a lot of conversations that take place every step of the way.
Polanski? It's Brian again.
Yeah.
I know no two construction projects can be compared as equals, but I mean, to look at Bristol Aggie, who went through something similar, it looks like their project was 104 million to expand from 450 to 600 students, so 150 more students. 51 million picked up by the state, 52.6 or so picked up by the towns. I mean, back of the napkin math, $351,000 per student. I mean, is there any way for us to do an exercise to try to figure out, like, do we even have a ballpark of what the towns would be looking at to tell Freetown, hey, if you want to be a member, this is the kind of nugget you're looking at in the future?
I think we could, Brian. The superintendent's group at the vocational level is a pretty tight-knit group of people. So I could reach out to the various superintendents and find out what their projects costed, because I think, to your point, no two projects are the same, and I think we'll see a variation. And certainly, there could be very divergent looking models. You know, Cape Cod Tech is doing a new school. Bristol Aggie's doing an addition. Minuteman did a totally new school, and it's like the Taj Mahal of vocational schools. So I think that they run the gamut, and I think that we'd have to figure out what works best for our population, to your point, because we might not always get what everybody else gets. It has to work for everybody, but I think we could do a little bit of research around that.
Aaron, Leah Fabian again. Didn't New Bedford Voc do a big expansion not too long ago, or was that longer than I think?
I honestly would be remiss if I tried to answer that. I'm not 100% sure, Leah.
Okay. I just, as another comparison, that's it. Thank you.
Right. I could send a survey out and really vet feedback from the multiple superintendents. The vocational superintendents are a very close-knit group. So I could do that for everybody and just find out what the costs of varying projects are. I know BP is doing work right now. Blue Hills is doing a renovation. So it's happening in a lot of different places at a lot of different levels, like Brian articulated.
But I also think it's only fair, Aaron, to give Freetown a realistic, instead of, you know, I certainly wouldn't want them to be sticker shocked.
Right.
It's a big difference between it could cost X and then the real number comes in and it's going to be more than they ever could have thought.
Sure.
And that causes them to bail out.
No, that's fair. I think we should.
I'd almost prefer to see a worst case scenario and let them plan on the worst and hope for the best.
Sure.
I would just echo, the cost is also going to help you pitch this, pitch the public, the 6 towns are going to pick up as much of a possible new school building. You know, it's going to help sell this whole agreement, so.
Yeah, I agree. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I know it was a very complex and perhaps may have been dragged out a little bit, but we really do appreciate everyone being here. And if we can answer any additional questions, you all have a way to reach me. If I don't get back to you in 24 hours, I'm on a milk carton. I'll always get right back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Very informative.
Appreciate it. Have a wonderful night, everybody.